Welcome, everyone, to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder Historian, and last time, Sherman was approaching Vicksburg. Now we settle into a siege and find out about Sherman's role in its capitulation. To help support the channel, consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, or purchase something from the Teespring store or Etsy shop. I really appreciate all the support that you give me. Following the failed attacks on the Confederate fortifications at Vicksburg, Grant ordered his commanders to lay siege to the city. Sherman followed orders and had his men dig earthworks and fire artillery at the entrenched rebels. Sherman stayed on the front line a great deal, supervising the shelling and lifting the spirits of his men to see their commander enduring the dreaded sharpshooter bullets that inevitably came whizzing past them. So many near misses caused rumors to circulate that Sherman had been seriously injured, and this rumor made it all the way to the president. However, Sherman was unhurt. During the siege, the Union Army of the Tennessee's rear was exposed to possible attack from Joseph E. Johnston's Confederate forces east of Vicksburg. Grant worried that Johnston may be reinforced and thus try to break the siege. In mid-June, Grant sent Sherman with a force to the Big Black River to protect the Union rear against an attack. Sherman found a distant relative in the area as he traveled back and forth from Vicksburg, and regularly took meals with the family. A mother of one of his Louisiana military seminary cadets was also in the area. She had a son in Vicksburg and asked Sherman to spare him. When Sherman asked about her husband, she sadly stated that he had been killed at Bull Run. After the woman and the dozen ladies she was with began to cry, Sherman rode away uncomfortable with the situation. This assignment came amidst another relief for Sherman. Corps Commander John McClernand was relieved of command for unauthorized publication of a report on the Vicksburg assaults. As the siege continued into the summer, the Union Army inched closer and the conditions within Vicksburg deteriorated to a horrible degree, with many of the city's inhabitants taken to living in caves to avoid the bombardments. The Confederate commander of the city, John C. Pemberton, lost favor with his men and officers, forcing him to reach out to Grant and surrender his forces. On July 4, 1863, the siege came to an end with Pemberton's Confederates being taken as prisoners of war. However, Sherman wasn't present during the surrender. He was chasing after Johnston inland. The Mississippi heat hindered the movements of Sherman and his troops as Confederates slaughtered cows and let them decay in ponds to prevent the Union soldiers from using the water. Sherman and his command got to Jackson on July 10th, and on July 11th, he began laying siege to the city. By the 17th, Johnston evacuated the capital. Sherman gave chase, but Johnston was just out of reach. When Sherman entered the city, he found a ruined people. Looting from both Union and Confederate soldiers had reduced the once vibrant city to, as Sherman put it, a ruined town. Jackson's officials came to Sherman admitting that they were beaten and subjugated, and charged their Confederate rulers with bringing disaster to the city and the state. Sherman asked Grant to place a depot in the city to distribute necessities of life for the people of Jackson, if Confederates would stay out of western Mississippi. Grant disagreed with placing a depot there for supplying the city, but did allow Sherman to distribute federal foodstuffs to the people. Sherman would state, "War was not a remedy for grievances or supposed grievances, for which our forefathers provided the Supreme Court of the United States to arbitrate and remove." One of Sherman's biographers put it best when he wrote, "Sherman was an early psychological warrior, using both the stick and the carrot to win over defeated populations. When the war was in progress, he was unforgiving, justifying the wholesale destruction to the scourge of war. Once the fighting was over, he was concerned about non-combatants and their loyalties. When he caught a soldier burning down a cotton gin during the march back to Vicksburg at a time when the torching in no way aided our military plans, he had the soldier and his accomplice court-martialed. He could tolerate pillage in battle, but not in its absence." Sherman gained great praise for his role in the Vicksburg campaign. Grant recommended Sherman for a promotion in the regular army to brigadier general, and the recommendation was accepted. After capturing Jackson, he moved with his command back to the Big Black River to rest and reorganize his forces. He also agreed for Ellen to come visit him in the field, but he would refuse furlough, believing it his responsibility to stay with his men. Sherman now saw victory as a great possibility, and with one of the greatest accomplishments of the war coming in part because of himself, he relished in the thought that the Union would be preserved. He wrote a letter of thanks to his troops, saying, "Let the magnificent result give to all new hope and assurance that by discipline, by patient industry, by courage and confidence in our country and cause, the United States of America will, instead of sinking into Mexican anarchy, arise with proud honor and glory and become what Washington designed it, the freest and best regulated government on earth. When Ellen came to visit, she brought with her 4 of their children, 12-year-old Minnie, 11-year-old Lizzie, 9-year-old Willie, and 6-year-old Tommy. They would spend 6 weeks with him. 4-year-old Ellie and 2-year-old Rachel would stay with the family in Lancaster. Willie was Sherman's pride and joy. He regularly took the little boy out on inspections, and one of the regiments allowed Willie to take part in guard duty and reviews. Tommy became a hit with the troops as well, especially when a Confederate under a flag of truce came into the camp. The rebel started a conversation with the boy, and during it, Tommy said, "Why, father can whip you fellows every time." When the rebel asked how Tommy knew such a thing to be true, the boy began telling him about troop numbers and locations. When Tommy came back to his father, Sherman jokingly said, "Why, you young traitor, you must be court-martialed and you will probably be shot." The family visited Vicksburg and spent time with Grant and his family. From all accounts, Sherman and his family enjoyed their time together, and because it was amid Union victories, Sherman was happy to have both his family and be on the track for winning the war. As he camped along the Big Black River, letters of congratulation came to him from friends and relatives. Even newspapers praised his role in the successful campaign. When the chairman of the Vicksburg Citizens Committee complained about insufficient Union provisions for the area's people, Sherman took the opportunity to express his ever more harsh war philosophy publicly. He lectured them by saying, "I contend that after the firing on our steamboats navigating our own rivers, after the long and desperate resistance to our armies at Vicksburg, on the Yazoo, and in Mississippi generally, we are justified in treating all inhabitants as combatants, and would be perfectly justifiable in transporting you all beyond the seas if the United States deemed it in her interest. But our purpose is not to change the population of this country, but to compel all the inhabitants to acknowledge and submit to the common law of the land. When all or part of the inhabitants acknowledge the just rights of the United States, the war as to them ceases." President Lincoln wanted to bring the states back into the Union as quickly and smoothly as possible. Henry Halleck asked Sherman what advice he would give Lincoln about reconstructing Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas. One of Sherman's biographers put it best when he wrote, "Sherman saw himself as a man of action, who should not have to stop and justify his Union-saving activity at every turn. War was to be waged totally if it was to be waged at all. It made no sense to fight the South and talk about Reconstruction at the same time. If Southerners did not want to suffer the inevitable ravages of war, their salvation lay in stopping the war, not in expecting the other side to be gentle. When victory was achieved, however, stop the bloodshed and destruction immediately, and help those in need irregardless of any oaths of allegiance." Sherman wrote that he opposed any civilian government until after all the organized armies of the South are dispersed, conquered, and subjugated. He would plainly assert the broad doctrine that the United States has the right and also the physical power to penetrate to every part of our national domain, that we will do it in our own time and in our own way, that we will remove and destroy every obstacle, if need be, take every life, every acre of land, every particle of property, everything that to us seems proper, that we will not cease till the end is attained, that all who do not aid us are enemies, and that we will not account to them for our acts. If the people of the South oppose, they do so at their peril, and if they stand by, mere lookers-on, in this domestic tragedy, they have no right to immunity, protection, or share in the final results. All, therefore, I can now venture to advise is to raise the draft to its maximum, fill the present regiments to as large a standard as possible, and push the war, pure and simple." While Sherman and his troops recuperated after the campaign, Union Major General William S. Rosecrans and the Army of the Cumberland was moving against Chattanooga, dislodged the Confederate Army of Tennessee from that city, then was defeated at the Battle of Chickamauga. The defeated Rosecrans pulled back to Chattanooga, but the army and the city would be placed under siege by Braxton Bragg and his Confederate army. With fellow Union troops in need, Grant and his successful Army of the Tennessee would be dispatched to East Tennessee to help relieve Rosecrans.